Good evening. Welcome to our final instalment of the BAMED Bumps Women's Health 4Ps series on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, wherever you're watching. Tonight we have Jess with us. Now, to give a bit of background about Jess, just a sec, Jess. I know you're very keen to get started on this exciting topic. In the past few weeks, we've had Kira, who is a similar physio to me in that we're both musculoskeletal physios who have a special interest in women and women's bodies, how they work. And then we've had Melinda, who's an internal pelvic health specialist. Now, Jess, she's a combo of both. She's a musculoskeletal physio as well as an internal pelvic health specialist. And she's here to talk to us tonight about all things puberty and how our bodies as girls might change as we go into womanhood. So welcome, Jess. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Sam. About me. So I've been a physio for 8 years now, predominantly worked in private practice pretty much the whole time. Spent a bit of time in rural Leeton, and we're working there for a little bit, and then moved up here to the Big Smoke to further progress my clinical experience, I guess, and been working in the women's health space sort of on and off for, I reckon, probably about 6 years now, but really sort of jumped in at BAMED and really got stuck into the lovely group that is BAMED Bumps.
It's great. It's a great team to be a part of, isn't it? I love it.
No.
Obviously, bouncing off each other all the time.
Oh,
but let's get stuck into tonight's topic. So for those of you who are out there watching, this is probably a nice resource for you to direct your prepubescent girls and even boys too, to learn a bit about what happens to girls as we change into women and how we are wonderful, complex creatures that actually can be understood a little bit. So first question, bit of an easy one, but what should girls expect in terms of physical changes during puberty, Jess?
Yeah, sure. So puberty is one of those pretty amazing things that happens to everybody, regardless if you are male, female, and even if you don't really identify at either gender either. Where I'm going to try and be as, transparent as possible, and just being aware that in, this kind of climate, some people, we'll call them people, just have female reproductive parts, and some people have male reproductive parts. So we're not going to be too specific with gender as best we can, but for those, forgive us if we stuff up a little bit. But puberty, basically, just to define it, is a bit of maturation of the body, where women in particular start to transition into women. So they have a maturation of their female sex organs. So the changes, they sort of occur gradually in some people. And one thing to caveat this whole little chat with about is nothing is normal in puberty and everything is normal in puberty. So don't freak out too much if some stuff that we're talking about today that either your kids haven't gone through yet or have gone through but their friends haven't, and all that sort of stuff. It's all normal. So
there's such a wide variation, right?
Oh, totally. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. So some of the physical changes that occur, the first ones in particular tend to be development of breasts. Particularly, this can sort of start to occur from any age. Earliest they've sort of seen is roughly around 8 to 9, but it can really be later on, almost up to like 14, 15 and that sort of stuff. So there's a huge age gap for where people can start to enter puberty, which is kind of nerve-wracking as any sort of like young girls out there. They're like, oh, I don't know, when this is happening.
We don't even touch on the social changes, do we? We'll just talk about the physical and emotional, but the social changes are huge as well.
Huge, massive. Another change that tends to happen is hips start to get a little bit wider as well, which is basically trying to allow people to prepare for pregnancy and birth. Doesn't mean that those children are necessarily ready for that. It just means that their body's just gearing up and starting to stretch its legs a little bit. And then we have also a little bit of pubic hair growth, which can occur in underarms and over the pubic region as well. And coincidentally, this doesn't mean, the growth of pubic hair doesn't necessarily mean that you're about to get your period. This is a term called adrenarche, and it just coincidentally tends to happen at the same time that people get their periods. But this can occur with girls aged at 5 and 6, and it's just one of those things. It happens when it happens, which is it can be pretty scary and a bit overwhelming, particularly for mums when, you might have been, you were 13 or 14 when those sort of changes started happening to you, and then your daughter is experiencing this at such a young age. It can be a little bit full on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then we've also got the acne, which is everybody's favourite. And purely just because those hormones are going absolutely crazy, your body starts to secrete a few more oils. That starts to collect in the pores in your skin, and then we start having breakouts on our face, on our chest, on your back, pretty much anywhere. Take your pick, it'll just pop up wherever.
Sounds really wonderful right now.
It really does. It really, really does.
I'm so glad I've gone through it.
I know, right? Although this is like I've still got a few little fun things going on. So, guys, sorry, but it never ends. And one of the other things that tends to happen, which can sometimes be the first sign that kids are going through puberty, is body odor. So, yes. All the teachers out there would probably know exactly what that is like. So basically, we have our bodies start to sweat, our pores start to secrete oil, and what happens is all the bacteria on our skin eats the proteins that our body sort of produces, which then causes that yucky smell. So in terms of the acne and the body odor, this is where discussions about hygiene start to come into place. And particularly in boys, the good old Lynx Africa starts to come into place. So,
I was actually just about to ask you, Jess, as you know, I've got 3 boys. I'm thinking to myself, does this mean they have to have like a shower in the morning, a shower in the afternoon, a shower in the night? Do I just have to have the conversation with them? I'm guessing.
Use soap is pretty much what you want to go.
Okay, that's all it is. Use soap.
Yeah, 100%.
And I know that would be for girls too, but I always
a lot of
personal experience.
Exactly. A lot of the changes that occur between in puberty, most of the stuff is actually across the board for girls and for boys. It's just the more specific things like the breasts, the widening of the hips, and the periods, of course, that is pretty much exclusive to girls.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, cool.
Which boys should know about too.
Boys should totally know about. Like everyone should know about this sort of stuff. So dads, I hope you're listening.
Yes. It'd be good to see if dads tune in. I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're pretty much the main physical changes, which leads us into the big one that everyone likes to talk about, which is periods.
Periods, yes. So how do you want to start, Jess? Do you want to tell us about the average age first of when someone might get their period?
So it can really, really vary. Anywhere from ages 8 all the way up to 15 is when you can get your period.
Yeah. There's
no real predictor about when that's going to happen. Although some girls, if you have a similar body shape to your mum, and your plumbing is fairly similar, then you may have a better indication that, okay, I'm about the same sort of build as my mum. She got hers when she was 10. Chances are you may get it closer to 10, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, okay, good to know. And so tell us a little bit more about periods. Give us a bit of a rundown. What happens normally?
Normally.
Normally. I know I hate that word, but I said it.
Yeah. So basically, when you first get your period, it's a bit of a weird one. The body is just sort of like, surprise, here it is. And it can be either regular from day dot, or can start off where you have once or, in a blue moon, and then it goes away for a few more months and then it comes back again. So particularly in the first 1 to 2 years of starting to get your period, things might be quite irregular, and that can be normal. It can also be normal for you to have it absolutely like clockwork every single month from the first time you get it, which is a little bit tricky, but it is what it is. We're just going to roll with it and sort of see what happens.
And that's the thing. I think girls need to know that you just sometimes need to roll with it for a little while before you start to worry. And same with mums. I'd imagine that, if I had one, my hypothetical daughter got her period and then didn't get it again for 3 months, I'd be like, oh, was that even it? And it would worry me. But actually knowing that it's irregular, it can be irregular for a little while is, I think, a bit of peace of mind there for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I guess we'll probably dive into, we've got a little infographic here on periods and what a normal cycle is. And cycles can really vary. They can go from anything from 21 days all the way up to 35 days. Even in early stages during puberty, it can even be up to 40 days, sometimes longer. But that's roughly it. So basically you've got two main phases. Sorry if I'm getting a little bit too technical for you guys out there, but look, pretty colours always make things a little bit easier.
Hopefully,
So the length of your period cycle goes from the day that you first get your period all the way to the day before you get your next one. That's basically how we calculate it. So if we kick it off at day one, where we've got our periods, we're feeling a little bit yucky, our hormones have dropped right off, but another lovely hormone, prostaglandins, is what really goes crazy during our period, which causes the uterus to contract to help expel all of the endometrial tissue, which is essentially what their period is, which can range in any sort of colour. It can go from like a really, really dark red to like a light brown to a dark brown. It can be varied, and it can be kind of scary when it first happens. There's this new thing, and it can be a small amount. It can be a really large amount. The normal sort of, I guess, volume of a period can range from 5 mils all the way up to 80 mils. And in like tablespoons, it can be like 2 to 6. So fairly decent. And that bleeding phase can last from anything from like 1 to 3 all the way up to like 8 days, up to 10 sometimes when kids are first going through their first period as well. So yeah, and the prostaglandins as well, they just make you feel yuck. And yeah, like as most women can speak from experience, it's not a super fun time. You generally feel a little bit yucky, and that's okay, because your body is doing a pretty hectic thing. It had done all this prep work to conceive, but we don't need it. So it's going to be like, all right, moving on, next thing. Yeah, let's do a little bit of a clean out and start afresh.
Yeah.
So that's basically the period. And then what happens is we start to enter the next phase where the estrogen starts to peak in preparation for ovulation. So ovulation is when the egg is released. So it peaks a fair bit before then and then starts to drop off as soon as ovulation occurs. So the egg's been released about halfway through your cycle. It's chilling, it's making its way down. What it also does is it can release some hormones as well. So it releases estrogen and progesterone, which are our two main female sex hormones. And after they sort of release and they're starting to do their thing, our hormones start to rise again. So progesterone and estrogen start to pick back up. And then this is to try and prep the uterus for an implantation of the egg, basically. So it starts to put down a little bit of lining, endometrial tissue, all that sort of stuff. And then the egg comes along, nothing going on here, I'm not needed, see you later. Those hormones drop right off, and that's when that period starts all over again. So there's a fair bit that goes on. So we've got our hormones on that graph there. Is the orange line is the estrogen. Oh, sorry, the blue line is estrogen and the purple line is the progesterone. So you can see they sort of ebb and flow throughout our cycle a little bit, which is probably why moods and stuff tend to go a little bit crazy as well during periods.
Yeah. I don't know about yourself, Jess, but it's always that week before my period that I actually feel worse. And I think it's because it's that progesterone that's really spiking and it makes you feel quite awful, and then your period comes and you go, oh yeah, that's why I felt terrible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's when your body's really busy. Like it's putting down all the groundwork to build that house for that egg to come and live in. But then, it doesn't need it anymore, so you can sit back and relax a little bit. Yeah. Definitely. And some people do experience a little bit of pain during, that's pretty standard, which I mentioned with the prostaglandins and the cramping. But we can get a little bit of pain at ovulation as well, which is a pretty cool word. It's called Mittelschmerz is the name for the...
You've taught me 2 new words tonight. Mittelschmerz, that's the other one.
Yeah.
Adrenarche was the first one.
That's for sure. Yeah. But sometimes that can be a really good sign if you're feeling, oh, I'm halfway through my cycle here, I'm getting a little bit of pain. That's right. It's probably ovulation. Yeah.
I actually think you never really want pain, but I think ovulation pain is one of those good ones to have as a sign to tell you that your body's kind of working and doing what it's meant to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a bit the same with period pain. Yes, it can be uncomfortable, but it's a bit of a sign that your body's working for you well.
Totally. They talk about some of the podcasts and research they've done is they talk about your period as being the 5th vital sign.
Yes.
So it really gives you a great insight onto how you're physically feeling, how your body's working, how your emotional state is as well, and can give you a great insight into nutrition and all that sort of stuff, and emotional stuff as well. Yeah.
And I think that's why you and I have kind of gotten into this so much, is that and why we've done this tonight particularly, because we want the next generation of young women to know that it's an integral part of us, not to be afraid of it, not to be scared of it, not to hide it. Like it should be completely normalized.
Absolutely.
And hopefully our culture is working towards that.
I think we're getting there slowly.
Slowly but surely.
Exactly.
Did we need that screen?
No, I think we do that one.
Yeah, no worries. Let me have a look at another question that we had. So you started to talk about how your period and your menstrual cycle is like a vital sign, and it can link into other parts of your life. What about how can having your menstrual cycle impact physical activity, and particularly if you're an athlete, or how it might impact your athletic performance? There's a lot of new stuff out there on this topic, which I love reading into. But what's your take on that, Jess?
Well, it's a really evolving area of study, isn't it? There's so much information coming out now that women in sport are starting to, pop up at a higher participation level, which is fantastic. People are actually starting to be like, all right, maybe we should actually look into this and see how we go. So some of the impacts you can have is obviously just generally feeling unwell on your period is going to make you not feel like training very well. So having just that almost discussion and openness between you and your coach is going to be really, really important in terms of being able to modify your training if you are an athlete as well. Different things along the lines of changes in hormone levels can affect ligament laxity, and they're looking at the effect of hormones on ACL ruptures, which is almost 3 to 6 times higher in women than it is in men. So a fairly significant increase. So well worth sussing that out, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I can't remember where I heard it or read it, and I would like for you to debunk it if it is a myth, but I actually heard in terms of physical strength or muscle strength, you're actually strongest during your period or at the start of your cycle. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah. So it's basically when women are most like men. So it's where those hormone levels are quite low. Yeah. Where you're going to not have any influence of those fluctuating hormones, and things are quite settled. So yes, it's still an evolving area, for sure. And there's different studies that are coming out now that says estrogen allows you to burn fat better, so you're better off doing like endurance training and that sort of stuff while your estrogen is quite high, so
pre-ovulation or pre-ovulation.
And those sorts of things. And that it's I can't remember, I think it's right before you get your period is where you're going to be a bit slow to recover. So you might want to have a few more rest days in between your training and that sort of stuff. But a lot of the stuff that's coming out is very dependent on the individual. So going back to periods for a little bit, probably the best way for you to know what to do on your period is to track it yourself. So mixing in that bit of information and evidence that you can gather on your own, and then matching it in with other sort of papers and things you've heard to see what works best for you.
Yeah. So actually that's probably something that kind of ties in together. Unfortunately, you and I probably see a lot of young female athletes that either have delayed puberty or they might be amenorrheic, which means they haven't quite got their period yet, or their period's really irregular even into their late teens and early 20s. And we obviously do a lot of education with those people about what they can do and who to see. But in terms of tracking, what do you recommend? Like, do you encourage young girls to start using an app straight away, or use a journal? I'm pretty sure that's what my mum made me do. Just
It's whatever works for each person, really. Yeah. Like the apps are awesome. I personally use a couple of apps just to see which one's best.
Yeah, there you go.
And there's so much more on it than just tracking your period. Like you can actually track changes in mood. You can track like different levels of pain, different heaviness of your period. So many things, how you're feeling, how you trained that day. Yeah. If you really want to go into it, you can track your body temperature, like go crazy. And most of them actually have some really good bits of education on there as well, and resources to use.
Yep.
Which, there's a lot of stuff out there of what's normal, what's not normal, that kind of stuff, and it can get a little bit overwhelming. Whereas if you've got something in an app that you're using that's been well funded and well researched, then you're going to get the right sort of stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. And for body nerds like you and I, it's really nice to watch your trends sometimes. I think it's not even just about your cycle, but your trends in other areas.
Absolutely, give me that graph. Yeah.
No, I'm not even the biggest data nerd, but I do like I use the Ovia, I think it's called, but tracking app. But there's quite a few out there to look out for. I use Flow is a really good one. Yeah. Lots of things out.
Clue is another good one, and Glow, and just PS, guys, you don't actually have to pay for them. I certainly do not pay for 3 subscriptions to a tracking thing. So they're most of them have pretty good features that are free too. So
that's so great, so great. Now, I'm thinking those apps, my next question is, what are places to reach out for guidance that isn't necessarily mum or dad? And I guess those apps are a good start, but do you have some go-to either websites, or obviously you chat with your friends about it, but sometimes that can be a little bit like just Googling just about anything. So what are some kind of reputable resources, I guess, Jess? What would you say?
Well, I'm going to put down the obvious one, us, Sam.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Thanks for the little softball there.
Anyway, yes, good, yes.
So your physio is a pretty good one, and I'd probably stick to a women's health one, just because this is a little bit of extra study that you got to do. So definitely come and have a chat to us.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your GP is a really important person to have in your life, particularly for ongoing care, because this is something that isn't going to just be a one-off, I've got a cold. This is something that you're going to have with you for a little while. So having a good relationship with the GP is really important as well. The apps are fantastic. There's a group that is down, I think it's like in South Australia and WA, Sam. It's the Pep Talk group, which is awesome. It's part of Pelvic Pain Australia, and they're doing they've got a fair bit of information for schools and that sort of stuff, and just a bit of general information on more sort of period related stuff. Another really good website for like boobs and breasts, because going into sport and that sort of stuff, a big consideration is obviously bra support and that sort of stuff, which is a huge area where there's actually some study that's coming out of Wollongong University as well, which is kind of exciting. And it's called Treasure Your Chest. So it has heaps of info on like how to get the right bra, how to look after your boobs, boob injuries, all that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty cool one. I like the name.
Yeah, it's so good. Good. It's interesting that, not even interesting, it's definitely coming and talking to one of us is a wonderful idea. And I'm finding that physios are starting to be trusted as a first contact type of practitioner, who perhaps you can't get into your GP, but you really need some kind of guidance now. with physical symptoms, physical pain, and just to add like pelvic pain, that you can come and see us is kind of huge, and it means you don't have to wait with your GP. But yeah, like you say, having a great relationship with your GP is really important. And if we can't help, then we'll always refer to a good GP. Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm just checking out. We've got a couple of minutes left on. There's been a couple of questions come through.
Yeah, cool.
What is discharge and what is normal? I thought that was a good one that we need to touch on.
Yeah, that's a great one. So like, as yucky as the word sounds, it's actually a really cool thing that happens. Your vagina is self-cleaning. Oh my God, amazing.
Magic?
So cool. Yeah, absolutely. So discharge is basically a little bit of fluid that your vagina excretes to clean itself. And that can change over during the different phases in your cycle. It can change with obviously infections and that sort of stuff, which is something to keep an eye on. It's another nice little vital sign to check that everything is working well. And it's normal, guys. So normal.
Yeah.
It can range from, it's kind of like, this sounds a little bit gross, but it's kind of like the equivalent of a booger in your nose, right? Like it stops all the yucky stuff from coming in there and we just get rid of it. So it can be clear. It can be kind of like stringy, kind of like egg white type consistency, which is normally typical pre-ovulation and then right before you get your period as well. It can be white, it can be sort of creamy coloured, it can be browny, particularly when it ends up like drying in your pants and that sort of stuff. And it shouldn't really smell too bad. If it does have a really strong odour to it, then I'd probably recommend getting that checked. And if it does end up sort of looking a little bit more like greeny or anything like that, definitely get it checked. Your body's pretty good at giving you a heads up if something's not quite right. So if it, looks a little bit different, definitely check with someone. Your mum's probably a good one to have a chat to. And then, definitely go get it checked.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've touched on a couple of things and I didn't want to go down the line of contraception or anything like that, but there are some really natural ways that you can track your period in order to know when you're ovulating to either get pregnant or not get pregnant, and the discharge is one of them. We have had a question come through, and I think this is from a friend of mine. Do you have any information sessions for primary schools? It might be something that we can link you in with. Do you have anything off the top of your head? Would that pep talk be a good resource?
Yeah, pep talk is a great resource. Definitely.
Yeah. And another one's just come through. What do you recommend for pain when cramping apart from painkillers?
Oh, let's go with as anything that works, basically.
Yeah.
So heat packs are really nice, warm showers, baths. Doing a few yoga or Pilates type stretches can be quite useful as well.
Yeah.
Exercise is also a really nice way to try and settle your pain and release the endorphins, pick up your mood a little bit. But it's got to be exercise that you feel like doing. Like you want to go out and do an interval hill session of sprinting. Like do something comfortable that makes you feel good after.
Yeah, absolutely. Sitting and cuddling your hot pack, watching a movie that makes you cry, that sometimes makes you feel better too.
Oh, so good.
Totally valid form of pain relief.
Oh,
yeah. Let me just check a couple more things. Make sure we've covered most of it. Just one last one I think is probably pretty important. Is it okay to not wear a tampon? And what if I can't put one in?
That's totally fine. Totally fine. It's okay if you can't quite get one in. You don't want to force these sort of things. We've got alternative options available. We've got those really cool period undies, which are just going rampant. Mod Body, I would recommend, are quite good.
Yeah.
But you can get them anywhere. I had a patient the other day tell me that her Kmart ones for $6 were the best thing she's ever bought. Yourself. We've got pads as well. There's if you're having issues with a tampon, then you're probably not going to work that great with a menstrual cup, but that is an option. And give it time. There's tampons with applicators and that sort of stuff that you can purchase as well, which can be a nice way to introduce that.
Yeah, nice.
Plenty of other options.
Thank you so much for your insight tonight, Jess. It's been so nice chatting with you.
Thanks, Sam.
No worries. That just about wraps us up. I'm going to miss doing these things, I think. Maybe we'll do some more in the future as well if any more questions come through. Remember, just email us, give us a call, book in for a session. And these are going to be on the internet forever, on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, if the internet lasts forever. So feel free to come back and use this as a resource or send it on to someone who you think might find it useful. So thanks for coming along, Jess, and thanks for everyone who tuned in. See you later.
Thanks, guys.